measures.
Speaker, NHS dentists form a really important part of the primary care workforce. However, in places like York, we have a complete desert where my constituents just cannot receive NHS dentistry. So what is he going to do for my constituents so that their oral health needs are addressed?
Well, we were setting out, Mr Speaker, to the House in due course a recovery plan dealing particularly with primary care but also with dentistry. We recognise that notwithstanding the fiscal support that was offered to protect dentistry through the pandemic, that it is an area of acute interest across the House, and my honourable friend will be saying more on that very shortly.
Councillor Crawley.
Question 21, please.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. £50 million has been invested last year through the Prevention and Promotion for Better Mental Health Fund in 40 local authorities that have the most deprived parts of the country. That's to boost prevention, early intervention and to support those hardest hit by the pandemic and the cost of living.
Mr Speaker, the Royal College of Psychiatrists in Scotland found that 52% of Scots are concerned about the impact of rising prices are having on their mental health. Poverty is a key driver of poor mental health, and those already struggling with poor mental health and money worries are likely to be the hardest hit. What discussions has she had with her Cabinet colleagues on the consequences of policies such as the punitive sanctions regime that are shown to increase anxiety and harm to people's mental health?
Minister.
Well, this government has been supporting people with the cost of living through the £37 billion package and £15 billion of the targeted support package for those most in need. That's £150 with help with council tax, £400 with electricity, the 8 million people supported with the £1,200 payments, and paying towards half of people's energy costs. This government is serious about helping people with the cost of living at this time.
Paul.
Mr Speaker, can I welcome the Government's commitment to tackling mental health, in particular the recent funding I've received in Stafford for a new crisis assessment centre in St George's? And can I ask the Government what further steps the Government is taking to improve access to mental health, especially in our schools?
Minister.
Well, can I thank the Honourable Lady for her hard work in securing that funding for the crisis centres in her constituency. These will make such difference because these are based in the community, trying to intervene at an earlier stage when someone's facing difficulty. This is on top of measures such as our mental health ambulances that will also respond to people in crisis, and also in terms of supporting our local communities dealing with mental health as well as those who've got a mental illness.
Paulette Hamilton.
Question number 22, Mr Speaker.
Mr Speaker, we increased real-term spending on general practice by more than a fifth since 2016. We're growing the workforce with 2,200 more doctors and 25,000 extra primary care clinicians compared to 2019. We've got the most GP doctors in training ever, up from 2,600 to 4,000. And in January, there were 11% more appointments in general practice than in the same month before the pandemic. And I pay tribute to the work that general practitioners are doing.
Paulette Hamilton.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Under the Tories, the number of qualified GPs has fallen to a record low. It's in local communities across the UK very hard. In Erdington, Kingstanding and Castle Vale, in January, over 2,000 people had to wait over a month for a GP appointment. So can the Minister tell me, isn't it the case that the longer the Tories are in power, the longer patients will have to wait?
Well, Mr Speaker, as well as the 2,200 extra doctors in primary care, I mentioned the 25,000 extra other clinicians. So, for example, that means in the Honourable Lady's constituency, there are now 55% more staff working in directly with patients than there were before.
Chloe Smith.
Thank you very much, Mr Speaker. At a time when GP services and indeed also A&E services are under pressure, I'm really pleased to see the ministerial teams focus on helping people to see a doctor when they need one. Would the Minister agree with me that walk-in centres, such as ours in Norwich City Centre, are helpful, popular and necessary?
Minister.
My honourable friend is absolutely right. Walk-in centres are a key part of primary care. We're looking at how they can do more, and I pay tribute to all the work they're already doing.
We now come to topicals. Tony on Tommy Atsey.
Question number 1, Mr Speaker.
Mr Speaker, on Friday I was proud to announce the winners of the third round of the Artificial Intelligence in Health and Care Awards. Winners include projects within the NHS that identify women at risk of stillbirth, help with neurological conditions, to find lung blockages, to assess the quality of transplant organs, and a number of projects focused on cancer, from identifying people's predisposition to its presence. Since their inception in 2019, the AI in Health and Care Awards have invested over £123 million in 86 promising projects supporting over 300,000 patients. And AI will come to save countless lives in the NHS in the years to come, and that begins with the investment today.
Thank
you, Mr. Speaker. Now, the Secretary of State should know that I am the co-chair of medicinal cannabis under prescription for children with intractable epilepsy. The situation is as intolerable as ever. Both product supply and cost is causing families great pain, and their children are desperate. Can I urge the Secretary of State to meet with me to discuss convening a round table to help identify solutions to this crisis surrounding the lack of access? And may I let the Secretary of State know that I am still awaiting a response from his Minister from the 18th of January 2023.
Well, first, Mr. Speaker, I'm very aware of the work that she does as chair of the APPG. And so I'm not surprised by the issue she raises. I know she's been assiduous in raising this important issue. On the follow-up with my ministerial colleague, of course, I will flag that to them. But I draw her attention to the fact that the National Institute for Health and Clinical Research remains open to research proposals in this specific area, and I would encourage her through the work that she does on the APPG to ensure that bids are made to generate the evidence, which is what clinicians who make the decisions on prescribing need in this space.
Sarah Atherton.
Mr. Speaker, Betsy Cadwallader University Health Board was taken out of special measures in 2020 without any tangible improvements. Last week, the board walked out en masse because they no longer had faith in the Welsh Labour government. And the health service is now back in special measures. As Welsh government run the NHS in Wales, if the First Minister of Wales was to ask, would the UK government step in to support them?
Well, we're always happy to assist colleagues across the United Kingdom as part of our commitment to the Union, but she is also right to highlight the current performance in Wales. As I said earlier, the fact that patients are waiting twice as long for hospital treatment in Wales as they are in England, and the fact that over 50,000 people in Wales are waiting more than 2 years for their operation.
So, Secretary of State West Streeting.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. When nurses and paramedics voted to take strike action, the Secretary of State refused to negotiate and said the pay review body's decision was final. Now he's U-turned, but not before 144,000 operations and appointments were cancelled through his incompetence. Will the Secretary of State now apologise to patients for this avoidable disruption?
Secretary of State.
Well, what he omits to remind the House is at that time the demand from the trade unions was for a 19% consolidated pay rise, which is very different to the basis on which talks have been entered. But the point is, we are in discussion with trade union colleagues. We have a shared purpose to address the very real challenges that we recognise that the NHS workforce has faced, particularly in the context of the pandemic, and a shared desire between the trade unions and the government to focus on patients and ensuring we get the right care in support of patients.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I think patients know who to trust, and it's nurses, not the Secretary of State, and have still learned nothing, Mr. Speaker. Despite a 98% vote in favour of strikes, the Secretary of State was sent to meet junior doctors without a mandate from the Prime Minister to negotiate. What is the point of this Health Secretary if he's in office but not in charge?
Mr. Speaker, given that I have come to the House literally from a meeting with the trade unions this morning, I was literally meeting with the NHS Staff Council this morning. Once again, we see a shadow front bench that writes its questions before it sees what is actually happening.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Sean Link, aged 30, Nashville, took his own life just before Christmas. No one saw it coming. And male suicide takes the lives of 12 young men in this country. It's the biggest killer of young males under the age of 40. Now, Graham is coming next week to watch me in a Westminster Hall debate on male suicide. So could somebody please, from the health team, meet with myself and Graham next Monday?
Minister.
Can I thank my honourable friend for raising this important issue? It's why we're launching the prevention of suicide strategy, and male suicides will be a particular focus in that as a high-risk group. The debate he refers to next week is being taken by the Department for Education, as it's specifically related to the national curriculum, but I'm very happy to meet him and his constituent.
What's in day?
Yeah. Thank you. Unprotected sun exposure causes skin cancer, with around 16,000 cases diagnosed each year. Affordable sunscreen is therefore essential for protection. So will the Secretary of State help tackle this issue by supporting the 10-minute rule bill by my honourable friend from East Dunbartonshire to remove VAT on sun protection products?
Well, he asked a question about skin cancer. We know that this is one of the most significant causes of cancer. That's one reason why we're working so hard with the NHS to reduce backlogs for people waiting for diagnosis and treatment for cancer, including rolling out teledermatology across the NHS to reduce times for diagnosis. But I think the question he was asking about VAT on skin cancer is, of course, a question for the Treasury.
John Penrose.
Mr. Speaker, finding and fixing the underlying causes of health inequalities has defeated governments of all types for decades. Less well-off British families still live significantly shorter, sicker lives than richer ones, cramping their life chances and making it harder to avoid or escape poverty. The long-expected Health Inequalities White Paper is essential to change this. Does the Secretary of State expect it to be published this month? And if not, will he meet me to discuss it?
Well, as was answered on a previous question, we have the major conditions paper, which is looking at these issues. But it's also important to look at variation in performance between ICBs, how we raise the bottom quartile up to the top quartile. There's far too much variation within the NHS, and also to be data-driven so that when it comes to genomics, when it comes to screening, we can target more precisely where the outliers are, which is driving the issue that he rightly highlights.
Campbell.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Under the 10-year cancer plan, will there be the very distinctive approach required in assessing the early diagnosis of brain tumours?
Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Well, cancer will be one of the substantial parts of the major condition strategy that we are bringing forward, looking at the major causes of ill health in the country, which cancer is, of course, one. And one part of that, of course, is making sure that we are good at diagnosing cancer. And the earlier you diagnose cancer, the better you're able to treat it, and therefore the better outcomes for people with cancer.
Chair of the Select Committee, Steve Bryan.
Thank you. Can I welcome the announcement today of Professor Deanfield as the government's prevention champion with a focus on cardiovascular disease, one of the main causes of which is, of course, smoking. Can I ask where we are with the updated tobacco control plan, and whether the Minister will look again at a smoke-free fund paid for by the tobacco industry to boost those new public health budgets?
Mr. Speaker, we will be setting out our next steps on smoking shortly. We do have the lowest smoking on record, down to 13%, partly as a result of doubling duty on cigarettes, partly as a result of bringing in a minimum excise tax, and we are going through putting 35 million in to the NHS this year to make sure that all smokers who are admitted to hospital get free NHS-funded tobacco treatment.
James Shannon.
Mr. Speaker, recent analysis from the Macmillan Cancer Report shows that 2022 was the worst year in record for cancer waiting times. Given this, will the Minister consider introducing an urgent support package for UK cancer services and the upcoming budget to support our hard-working staff and to ensure that there is additional capacity to deal with the current system pressures? Thank you.
Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Well, it is indeed very worrying for anyone who's waiting to know whether they have got cancer, or if they get a diagnosis then they are waiting for treatment. I can assure him we've got more people coming forward for cancer checks at the moment, which is a good thing. More people being treated for cancer, and the NHS is reducing some of the backlogs following the pandemic.
Sir David Evans.
Mr. Speaker, can I welcome the government's actions on obesity today, but it remains an increasing health issue for our nation. Does my right honourable friend agree that education for children and parents on healthy eating is a top priority and should be? And can I urge this department to increase campaigns on the consequences of obesity?
His question was so good I was eager, Mr. Speaker, to answer it earlier. But he is quite right to highlight that, and that's part of a wider thrust within government prevention, which is about how we empower the patient. And that's about getting more data to the patient, it's about using genomics, it's about using screening, so the patient is more informed, and through that can opt to take decisions in terms of healthy eating, rather than the state try and impose that on them in a top-down manner.
Judith Cummins.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As chair of the All-Party Parliamentary Group on Osteoporosis, our recent report from the Royal Osteoporosis Society showed that an investment of just £27 million per year in fracture liaison services would deliver over £600 million in savings over 5 years for the NHS. So will the Minister meet with me and the ROS to discuss our report and commit to ending the postcode lottery by providing 100% coverage for FLS for over 50s in England?
Well, very happy for a member of the ministerial team to meet with the Honourable Lady. Obviously, she sets out a compelling case in terms of the return on investment. Clearly, we will need to scrutinise that in more detail, and I'm sure colleagues will look forward to doing so.
Manchester.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. With regards to the government's hospital buildings programmes, the Secretary of State knows Medway's case for it. With the hardest hit area during COVID-19, some of the highest health inequalities in the country, and one of the busiest A&Es in Kent. Will the Secretary of State visit Medway with me to look at urgent needs so we can be part of that hospital buildings programme for the future?
Well, he is right to highlight the issues of Medway and Kent as a whole. I, in fact, was meeting with the Chief Exec of Maidstone Hospital yesterday, discussing some of the innovation that they have applied that has benefits across the board. In terms of the new hospitals programme, I remind him of the comments that my right honourable friend, the Prime Minister, made on the 22nd of February, confirming the government's commitment to that programme.
Jeff Smith.
Thank you. Every day, families of women who took the drug Primados in the 1960s and 70s continue to suffer the consequences of a lifetime of disability. Baroness Cumberledge's review made clear that Primados caused avoidable harm and that families should be given redress. So why has the government recently refused 3 mediation requests on behalf of families?
Minister.
Well, the Honourable Gentleman will know we have huge sympathy for those affected by Primados. He will know there is a legal case at the moment, so we're unable to comment at this time, but I'm very happy to discuss that with him further.
Richard Fuller.
Mr. Speaker, over the last year or so, Bedfordshire's fire service and ambulance service have taken very innovative steps to cooperate to bring response times down. They are now working on a plan to deepen that cooperation. Will my right honourable friend facilitate a meeting with the leaders of the fire service and ambulance service in due course when that plan is ready?
Well, my honourable friend is right to highlight the community services that we're doing as part of our urgent and emergency recovery plan, looking at how we deliver care quicker through innovative models, and one of those is through better cooperation with the fire service.
Samantha Dixon.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. York and Chester have many similarities, and it would appear that complete absence of any access to dental services is another one. Can I impress on the Minister the urgency of improving dentist access to NHS dentistry, because it's really essential my constituents don't have to travel for miles and worry for months.
Mr. Speaker, we will be setting out further steps shortly. There are 6.5% more dentists doing work for the NHS than in 2010. We have started the reforms with more UDA bans and the minimum UDA, but we will be setting out further steps shortly.
Sir Christopher Cho.
Mr. Speaker, does my right honourable friend accept that about 1/3 of the activity that takes place in GP surgeries could be transferred to pharmacies? And what is he doing to promote that policy and deal with the BMA's reluctance to cooperate?
Well, my honourable friend is right to highlight a number of services within GPs that GPs currently do could be performed by pharmacy, and we're looking at that in the context of the primary care recovery plan. But it's also about looking at how we relieve some of the workload pressure within primary care itself. That is why we recruited the extra 25,000 additional staff to support GPs. It's also why we've got over 2,000 more doctors in primary care.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. 30% of disabled people, including many of my constituents in West Derby, are having to cut back on using essential medical equipment at home due to rising energy bills. 70,000 people have signed a charity census petition calling for long-term ongoing support for disabled people and their families. Will the Secretary of State deliver this support as a matter of urgency?
Mr. Speaker, that is exactly why this winter we're spending £55 billion to help households and businesses with their energy bills, and that's one of the largest support packages in Europe.
Slane Saxby.
Mr Speaker, does my right honourable friend agree that community-based drop-in mental health services like the Link Centres in North Devon are vital in remote rural communities? And will he urge Devon County Council to not only continue these services but improve and extend this model?
Yes. Well, it is for schemes like that that we are investing a further £2.3 billion a year into mental health services. That in turn is facilitating an extra 2 million patients to access NHS funding mental health support of the schemes to which she highlights to the House.
Lizzie Cooper.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. More than £300 million of the NHS dentistry budget is set to be clawed back by NHS England at the end of this month. This is not because of a lack of demand, but because the government's NHS dental contract is broken, so dentists are walking away from NHS work. Will the government ring-fence these funds, roll them over to next year, so that people who desperately need dental treatment can get those appointments?
Yeah.
Mr Speaker, this is exactly why we will continue to reform the contracts. The Honourable Lady says it's why we've started allowing dentists to do 110% of their UDA so they can do more. But she's right, we will go further.
Peter Gibson.
Speaker, can I refer the House to my entries in the Register of Interest, including co-chair of the APPG for hospices? Now that ICBs have a duty to commission palliative care, what steps is my right honourable friend taking to assess delivery of this, and will he join me in calling for the North Eastern Cumbria ICB to listen to the hospices in the Tees Valley, which will save our hospices and save the NHS money?
Well, he's right to draw the House's attention to the extremely important work that hospices do, and also the fact that commissioning decisions are devolved to the Integrated Care Board in order that they can target funding in the way that best serves local communities. And he's quite right to lobby on their behalf, and I'm sure his relevant ICB will take note of that.
That completes health questions. Before we come to the statement on the illegal migration bill, I wish to make a brief statement. I'm aware that there are a number of cases before the courts which relate to the subject matter of the bill. Given the national importance of the issues to be discussed, I am prepared to exercise a waiver and allow brief references to those cases. However, I would ask members to exercise caution and not to refer in detail to issues which are being considered by the courts. I now call the Home Secretary to make a statement.
With permission, Mr Speaker, I would like to make a statement about the government's illegal migration bill. 2 months ago, the Prime Minister made a promise to the British people. He said that anyone entering this country illegally will be detained and swiftly removed. No half measures. The illegal migration bill will fulfil that promise. It will allow us to stop the boats that are bringing tens of thousands to our shores in flagrant breach of both our laws and the will of the British people. Now, the United Kingdom must always support the world's most vulnerable. Since 2015, we've given sanctuary to nearly 500,000 people. These include 150,000 people from Hong Kong, 160,000 people from Ukraine, 25,000 Afghans fleeing the Taliban. Indeed, my own parents, Mr Speaker, decades ago found security and opportunity in this country, something for which my family is eternally grateful. Crucially, these are decisions supported by the British people, precisely because they were decisions made by the British people and their elected representatives, not by the people smugglers and other criminals breaking into Britain on a daily basis. For a government not to respond to waves of illegal migrants breaching our borders would be to betray the will of the people we were elected to serve. Now, the small boats problem is part of a larger global migration crisis. In the coming years, developed countries will face unprecedented levels, with pressures from ever greater numbers of people leaving the developing world for places like the United Kingdom. Unless we act today,
the problem will be worse tomorrow. And the problem is already unsustainable. Mr. Speaker, people are dying in the Channel. The volume of illegal arrivals has overwhelmed our asylum system. The backlog has ballooned to over 160,000. The asylum system now costs the British taxpayer £3 billion a year. Since 2018, some 85,000 people illegally entered the United Kingdom by small boat, 45,000 of them in 2022 alone. All travelled through multiple safe countries in which they could and should have claimed asylum. Many came from safe countries like Albania. Almost all passed through France. The vast majority, 74% in 2021, were adult males under the age of 40, rich enough to pay criminal gangs thousands of pounds for passage. Upon arrival, most are accommodated in hotels across the country, costing the British taxpayer around £6 million a day. The risk remains that these individuals just disappear, and when we try to remove them, they turn our generous asylum laws against us to prevent removal. The need for reform is obvious and is urgent. This government has not sat on its hands, Mr. Speaker. Since this Prime Minister took office, recognising the necessity of joint solutions with France, we've signed a new deal providing more technology and embedding British officers with French patrols. And I hope Friday's Anglo-French summit will further deepen that cooperation. We've created a new small boats operational command with over 700 new staff. We've doubled NCA funding to tackle the smuggling gangs. We've increased enforcement raids by 50%. We've signed a deal with Albania, which has already enabled the return of hundreds of illegal arrivals. And we're procuring accommodation, including on military land, to end the farce of accommodating migrants in hotels. But let's be honest, it's still not enough. In the face of today's global migration crisis, yesterday's laws are simply not fit for purpose. So to anyone proposing de facto open borders through unlimited safe and legal routes as the alternative, let's be honest, there are 100 million people around the world who could qualify for protection under our current laws. Let's be clear, they are coming here. We've seen a 500% increase in small boats crossings in 2 years. And this, Mr. Speaker, is the crucial point of this bill. They will not stop coming here until the world knows that if you enter Britain illegally, you will be detained and swiftly removed. Removed back to your country if it's safe, or to a safe country, a safe third country like Rwanda. And that is precisely what this bill will do. That is how we will stop the boats. Mr. Speaker, this bill enables detention of illegal arrivals without bail or judicial review within the first 28 days of detention until they can be removed. It puts a duty on the Home Secretary to remove illegal entrants and will radically narrow the number of challenges and appeals that can suspend removal. Only those under 18, medically unfit to fly, or at a real risk of serious and irreversible harm, an exceedingly high bar in the country we are removing them to, will be able to delay their removal. Any other claims will be heard remotely after removal. And when our Modern Slavery Act passed, the impact assessment envisaged 3,500 referrals a year. Last year, 17,000 referrals took on average 543 days to consider. Modern slavery laws are being abused to block removals. That's why we granted more than 50% of asylum requests from citizens of a safe European country and NATO ally, Albania. That's why this bill disqualifies illegal entrants from using modern slavery rules to prevent removal. Mr. Speaker, I won't address the bill's full legal complexities today. Some of the nation's finest legal minds have been and continue to be involved in its development. But I must say this. Rule 39 and the process that enabled the Strasbourg court to block at the last minute flights to Rwanda after our courts had refused injunctions was deeply flawed. Our ability to control our borders cannot be held back by an opaque process conducted late at night with no chance to make our case or even appeal decisions. That's why we've initiated discussions in Strasbourg to ensure their blocking orders meet a basic natural justice standard, one that prevents abuse of Rule 39s to thwart removal. And it's why the bill will set out the conditions for the UK's future compliance for such orders. Other countries share our dilemma and will understand the justice of our position. Our approach is robust and novel, which is why we can't make a definitive statement of compatibility under Section 19(1)(b) of the Human Rights Act. Of course, the UK will always seek to uphold international law, and I am confident that this bill is compatible with international obligations. And when we stop the boats, Mr. Speaker, the bill will introduce an annual cap to be determined by Parliament on the number of refugees the UK will settle via safe and legal routes. This will ensure an orderly system, considering local authority capacity for housing, public services and support. So to conclude, Mr. Speaker, the British people are famously a fair and patient people. But their sense of fair play has been tested beyond its limits, and they've seen the country taken for a ride. Their patience has run out. The law-abiding, patriotic majority have said, enough is enough. This cannot and will not continue. Their government, this government, must act decisively, must act with determination, must act with compassion, must act with proportion. So make no mistake, this Conservative government, this Conservative Prime Minister will act now to stop the boats, and I commend the statement to the House.
Shadow Home Secretary Yvette Cooper.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. A record 45,000 people crossed the Channel on dangerous small boats last year, up from just 280 4 years ago. In that short time, the government has allowed criminal gangs to take hold along the Channel and along our border. At the same time, convictions of people smugglers have halved. Home Office asylum decisions have collapsed, down 40%. The backlog and costly, inappropriate hotel use has soared. Removals of unsuccessful asylum seekers are down 80% on the last Labour government, and legal family reunion visas for refugees are down 40%. This is deeply damaging chaos. And there is no point in ministers trying to blame anyone else for it. They have been in power for 13 years. The asylum system is broken, and they broke it. We need serious action to stop dangerous boat crossings which are putting lives at risk and undermining border security. And that is why Labour has put forward plans for a cross-border police unit for fast-track decisions and returns to clear the backlog and end hotel use, and a new agreement with France and other countries. But instead, today's statement is Groundhog Day. The Home Secretary has said anyone who arrives illegally will be deemed inadmissible and either returned to the country they arrived from or a safe third country. Only that wasn't this Home Secretary, it was the last one. And that wasn't this bill. It was the last one, passed only a year ago, which did not work. And as part of last year's bill, the Home Office considered 18,000 people as inadmissible for the asylum system because they had travelled through safe third countries, but because they had no return agreements in place, just 21 of them were returned. That is 0.1%. The other 99.9% just carried on, often in hotels, at an extra cost of £500 million. And it didn't deter anyone. Even more boats arrived. So what is different this time? They still don't have any return agreements in place. The Home Secretary herself has admitted Rwanda is failing, and even if it gets going, it will only take a few hundred people. So what will happen to the other 99% of people under this bill? Now, she says she's going to detain them all, maybe for 28 days. She could tell us how many detention centres they will need and how much that will cost. But even if she does, what will happen when people leave 28-day detention? Will she make people destitute, so they just wander the streets in total chaos? Torture victims, Afghan interpreters, families with children? Or will she put them into indefinite taxpayer-funded accommodation? Never returned anywhere because they don't have the agreements with Europe in place, neither returned nor given sanctuary, never having their case resolved. Just forever in asylum accommodation and hotels. She may not call it the asylum system, but thousands more people are still going to be in it, nevertheless. And what does it mean for the promises that we made to the Afghan interpreters who served our country, but who were too late to make the last flight out of Kabul as the tyranny was closing in on them? The government told them to flee and find another way here, and they told us to tell people that as well. But the resettlement scheme isn't helping them. And if they arrive in this country, finally, this afternoon, perhaps by travelling through Ireland to get here, they will only ever be illegal in the eyes of the government who relied on the sacrifices they made for us. So if the government was serious, it would be working internationally to get a proper new agreement in place with France and Europe, including return agreements, and properly controlled and managed legal routes such as family reunion and reform of resettlement. Instead, this bill makes this harder, unilaterally choosing to decide no asylum cases at all, but expecting every other country to carry on. And they would work with Labour on our plan for a major new cross-border police unit to go after the criminal gangs. But instead, the Deputy Chair of the Conservative Party said yesterday we shouldn't go after the gangs because, well, they've existed for thousands of years. That is the disgraceful Tory attitude that's let the gangs off the hook and letting the gangs take hold. And one smuggler told Sky News yesterday that 3/4 of the smugglers live in Britain, yet barely any of them are being prosecuted, and they still haven't found the hundreds of children missing from asylum hotels who've been picked up by criminal gangs. They could be setting out a serious plan today, and we would work with them on it, and so would everyone across the country. Instead, it's just more chaos. They say no ifs, no buts, but all of us know they're going to spend the whole of the next year iffing and butting and looking for someone else to blame when it all goes wrong. Enough is enough. We can't afford any more of this slogans and not solutions, just government by gimmick, ramping up the rhetoric on refugees but picking fights simply to have someone else to blame when things go wrong. This bill isn't a solution. It is a con that risks making the chaos worse. Britain deserves better than this chaos. Britain is better than this.
Mr. Speaker, I thank the Right Honourable Lady for her remarks, but forgive me, after 5 minutes of hysteria, histrionics and criticism, I'm still not clear. I've just got no idea what Labour's plan is. I'll assume the Shadow Home Secretary is still committed to scrapping our Rwanda partnership, as she said last year. I'll assume that the Leader of the Opposition still wants to close immigration removal centres, as he promised during his leadership campaign. Shadow Home Secretary talks about safe and legal routes. I wonder what number they would cap that at. 500,000? A million? 5 million? She should be honest with this House and with the British people. What she really means is unlimited safe and legal routes. Open borders by the back door. She says get serious. Well, let's look at the facts, Mr. Speaker. The British people want to stop the boats. It's one of the 5 promises that the Prime Minister made to the British people. But stop the boats didn't even feature in the Leader of the Opposition's 5 big missions. It's because he probably doesn't care, or is it because he doesn't care, or because he doesn't know what to do? We all know why, and I think the British people know why. It's because deep down, the Leader of the Opposition doesn't want to stop the boats. He thinks it's bigoted to say that we've got too much illegal migration abusing our system. It's because Labour MPs would prefer to write letters stopping the removal of foreign national offenders. It's because the Labour Party would prefer to vote against our measures to penalise foreign national offenders, to streamline our asylum system. Those are the facts, Mr. Speaker. Labour are against deterring people who would come here illegally. They are against detaining people who do come here illegally, and they are against deporting people who are here illegally. That means, Mr. Speaker, that they are for this situation getting worse and worse. Perhaps that's fine. Perhaps that's fine. Perhaps that's fine for the Leader of the Opposition and most of the Labour front bench, but it's not their schools, it's not their GPs, it's not for their public services, housing and hotels filling up with illegal migrants. Perhaps that's why, even before seeing this bill and engaging on the substance, Labour has already said that it wouldn't support its passage through Parliament. Is the Leader of the Opposition committing that the Labour Lords will block it? The British people want to stop the boats. The Conservative government has a plan to stop the boats. This Prime Minister will stop the boats. And if the people want closed minds and open borders, then they can rely on Labour.
Tim Walton. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Never have I heard such fabricated rage against genuine attempts to come up with practical solutions for this problem from a party opposite that has consistently been a policy vacuum on any practical solutions at all. So I support this bill, and particularly the provisions for sustainable, safe and legal routes for genuine asylum seekers. Can I specifically ask the Home Secretary on the Rwanda scheme? When the Home Affairs Select Committee visited Calais recently, we were told that when the Rwanda scheme was announced, there was a big upsurge in migrants in France approaching the authorities, asking about staying in France because there was a deterrent factor. It hasn't happened because the Rwanda scheme has not got off the ground. So when she sees her counterparts in France on Friday, can we suggest that the French might like to join us in a joint Rwanda-type scheme because they face the same problems? And can they do more? Now, we do have safe and legal routes to stop people getting in the boats, arrest them, and stop this illegal trade at source on their side of the channel.
My right honourable friend is absolutely correct. Deterrence is the key theme running through these measures. We want to send the message loudly and clearly to those people smugglers, to those people thinking about crossing the channel. Do not do it. Do not hand over your life savings. Do not get into that flimsy dinghy. Do not risk your life, because you will not be entitled to a life in the UK.
SNP spokesperson Stuart C. MacDonald.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the SNP stands proudly behind the Refugee Convention and the European Convention on Human Rights. We believe that all who seek asylum and seek refugee status deserve a fair hearing, and we are 100% behind the clear statement from the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees that there is no such thing as an illegal asylum seeker. Mr. Speaker, despite the dreary dog whistle rhetoric, her bill will not so much as lay a solitary finger on people smugglers or people traffickers, but it will cause serious and devastating harm for people who have already endured incredible suffering. Afghans let down by the government's utterly failed relocation schemes will be locked up and offshored. People who have fled persecution in Syria, Eritrea or Iran will remain blocked from the asylum system. The policies that have seen hundreds of children go missing from hotels will be enshrined in her bill. The world-leading modern slavery legislation piloted through by her predecessor is about to be ripped to pieces without a single shred of justification. Mr. Speaker, that is what her appalling bill looks set to deliver, and that is why we will oppose it every step of the way. Mr. Speaker, if every country followed her example, the whole system of refugee protection around the world would fall to pieces. But it's not just the system of refugee protection around the world that's going to be trashed by this bill, but the UK's reputation as a place of sanctuary. Mr. Speaker, she spoke about an overwhelmed asylum system. The only thing that has overwhelmed the asylum system is the Conservative Party's incompetence and mismanagement. Ugly, likely to be counterproductive and of doubtful legality. That's how one of her own ministerial colleagues described the Rwanda plan, and that also beautifully encapsulates what's in her bill. So, Mr. Speaker, 2 questions for the Home Secretary. What happens then if an Afghan arrival cannot be removed to Afghanistan, France, Rwanda or anywhere else? Will he or she eventually be admitted to the asylum system, and if so, after how long? And finally, Mr. Speaker, when the Prime Minister meets with President Macron, will he be telling the President that the UK is prepared to leave the European Convention on Human Rights?
Home Secretary.
Mr. Speaker, a lot of passion, a lot of fury and a lot of fire. I would only wish that the Scottish Government would bring so much passion to their approach to accommodating asylum seekers when it's Scotland who currently takes one of the lowest numbers of asylum seekers out of our United Kingdom. Our measures set out a comprehensive and coherent plan combining fairness and compassion.
Lee Anderson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Now then, when asked by a reporter if foreign rapists and murderers should be deported to the country where they came from, the lawyer of the opposition replied, "It depends." Well, I say get rid. So does the Home Secretary. Can she confirm that this bill will indeed get rid of foreign rapists and murderers?
Home Secretary.
Well, he's right to point out the shameless position that the Labour Party has adopted, frankly. We have passed measures to make it easier to remove foreign national rapists, drug dealers, murderers. What does the Labour Party do? They write letters to stop us.
Chair of the Select Committee, Dame Diana Johnson.
Mr. Speaker, in the Home Affairs Select Committee report, which was published last summer on Channel crossings, we found that small boats had not overwhelmed the asylum system, as the Home Secretary is claiming today. The backlog has been allowed to grow since 2013 and is now over 160,000. And we said poor resourcing by successive governments of staff and technology in the asylum operations function of the Home Office has been a significant factor in its collapse. In our report, we also found that the government should deal with the backlog, expand safe and legal routes, and negotiate a returns policy with the EU. So can the Home Secretary tell the House what progress has been made on expanding safe and legal routes and progress on a returns policy with the EU?
Home Secretary.
Well, I think it's clear for everyone to see that our asylum system has been overwhelmed by unprecedented numbers of people arriving here and very high numbers being processed currently. We have made good progress both with the EU and our counterparts in France, and that's why I'm very much looking forward to the Anglo-French summit this Friday that our Prime Minister is going to be leading with the French President to discuss this issue in more detail.
Simon Fell.
The balance of creating a strong enough deterrent to cripple the gangs and rendering these routes unviable whilst being fair is absolutely key. So I appreciate the needle that the Home Secretary is trying to thread here. and the effort she's put into this solution. But could she confirm that under this plan, as the deterrent measures kick in and the asylum backlog is worn down, that safe and legal routes will reopen from countries outside of Syria, Afghanistan, Hong Kong and the Ukraine? And could she estimate when they will reopen?
Home Secretary.
We do have several schemes which are open to people from all nationalities to come here via safe and legal routes. We will, thanks to this bill, be having a more comprehensive discussion, a decision endorsed by Parliament, and one which has more legitimacy in how we go forward on allowing safe and legal routes furthermore into this country.
As the child of migrants, can I assure the Home Secretary how much I deplore her seeking to smear migrants as a whole as criminals and rapists? And can I also assure the House that I will never vote for legislation that would have led to my parents being detained and dumped in Rwanda? And can she tell the House, she talks about detention and deportation, where is she going to detain these people? There is not the capacity to detain these numbers of people. And in terms of deportation, the only arrangement we have is with Rwanda. Rwanda has told us they can only take 200 people. Her tone, her legislation, her proposed actions are deplorable and unworkable. And even at this late stage, can she reconsider?
With respect to the right honourable lady, it is wrong and frankly naive and inflammatory to conflate people who come here legitimately, abiding by our laws, and come here on a legal basis, and those who are coming here breaking our laws illegally and putting themselves and others at risk. I urge her to choose her words carefully.
Amanda Billing.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I welcome the Home Secretary's statement and the measures she set out today. What would be her key message to my constituents who are angry about the use of hotels to house asylum seekers in and around Cannock Chase?
Home Secretary.
The message I would send to her constituents is that we need to stop the boats coming here in the first place. And once we succeed with that objective through the measures in this bill, then we will be able to stop them being accommodated in hotels.
Paula Barker.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Rwandan government has said that they are only able to take 200 people. So can the Home Secretary tell this House what will happen to the 44,800 others that are waiting in the system? Can she also tell this House if she believes the £120 million that has gone to Rwanda is value for money? And also, will she also confirm that an additional approximately £12,000 per refugee for process costs will also be added to the Rwanda bill?
Well, I'm incredibly proud of what the Conservative government achieved in securing the agreement, the groundbreaking, world-beating agreement with our friends and allies in Rwanda. And I put on record my thanks to my right honourable friend, the member for Witham, for leading that work. Our scheme with Rwanda has been upheld by the High Court just at the end of last year. That's a big step forward in our litigation, and we look forward to working with our friends in Rwanda to delivering it.
Sir Edward Lee.
Although it's been all over the press this morning, West Lindsey District Council has not still been informed officially that the Home Office is planning to place migrants in RAF Scampton, former RAF Scampton. We have just announced yesterday, after 2 years of work, a £300 million scheme to have the best ever handover of an MOD base, the home of the Dam Busters, business, tourism, heritage. Will the Home Secretary assure me that if she overrides our objections and places migrants here, that she will work closely with me and the Council to ensure this is strictly temporary and that in no way does this upset the best deal that has ever come to North Lincolnshire?
Home Secretary.
Well, my right honourable friend, the Immigration Minister, is working intensively to secure bespoke and appropriate and, importantly, sustainable asylum accommodation around a range of locations within the United Kingdom. And we are working with local authorities and members of Parliament. We want to make the right decision for communities, and that's why all dialogue is welcome.
Wendy Chamberlain.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Torpiki Amrakil, an Afghan journalist and former announcer on Radio Afghanistan and the UN radio station UNAMA, drowned in Italian waters on the way to Europe last weekend. Given the brutality of the Taliban regime and the precarious security situation in neighbouring third countries, it is shocking that there is no specific safe route for Afghan women and girls at risk. We have failed the people of Afghanistan at every stage, and the UK is an outlier in this regard. So what steps is the Home Secretary taking to create a specific safe route, or at least ensure existing promises are being kept?
Home Secretary.
Unspeakable tragedy is occurring on the Channel and through all maritime routes around the world because of the global migration crisis. That is why it is absolutely essential that the UK takes a robust approach, but a compassionate approach. This is at core a humanitarian package of measures which sends the message to people: do not come here illegally.
Sir Ian Duncan-Smith.
Mr Speaker, can I welcome my right honourable friend's statement? Once we strip away the rhetoric, of course, the key to all of this is how do we save lives that are people that are dying in the Channel trying to get across, abused by the traffickers. So I listened very carefully to my right honourable friend's statement, understand all the other features, although we may have a debate about the numbers that she quotes in terms of the modern-day slavery problems. But notwithstanding that, I just wish, could my right honourable friend expand a little bit on the issue that stopped the migrants being taken to Rwanda last time, which was the intervention of the Court of Human Rights. I didn't really hear anything in this statement to suggest that anything has changed on that matter.
Home Secretary.
Well, he's right to identify the difficulties that we had in effecting flights to Rwanda last year in the summer. And as I mentioned, the Strasbourg court issued what's called a Rule 39 order, pursuant to an opaque process at the last minute without UK representation or right of challenge. We'll be introducing some detail in the bill to address that scenario and inject some conditions upon which we will deliver the measures in Rule 39.
Lynn Brown.
I'm grateful, Mr Speaker. Empty slogans, chaos and broken promises is all we've heard from the Home Secretary today. Return of failed asylum seekers has collapsed by 80% since Labour left office in 2010. Isn't that an extraordinary level of incompetence by this government?
You know, Mr Speaker, what I find irresponsible and frankly incompetent is the Labour Party voting against our measures to remove foreign national offenders, to streamline our asylum system and to take a firm line on illegal migration.
Durham Hendry.
Mr Speaker, I broadly welcome the announcement today and measures being put in place to prevent dangerous crossings taking place across the Channel. But can the Home Secretary tell me how precisely it will affect those migrants living in hotels near my inland Midlands constituency of Broxtowe and move them to more appropriate accommodation, as she mentions, maybe in military land?
Our 10-point plan announced in December deals with the issue of asylum accommodation. It's unacceptable that there are over 40,000 people being accommodated in hotels all over the country at a cost of £6 million a day. Therefore, my right honourable friend, the Immigration Minister, is working intensively with other departments, with local authorities all over the country to identify and procure sustainable and appropriate asylum accommodation.
Joanna Chorry.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. The Home Secretary has often said that she would be quite happy if the United Kingdom left the European Convention on Human Rights. And when the Justice Secretary gave evidence to the Joint Committee on Human Rights last year, he said that the government weren't ruling out
processing. I take up their cases
and I get sheets of responses which are the same 3 or 4 sentence responses, and it moves no further. Can I ask the Home Secretary, could she at least provide the House with a monthly report on how the processing of these cases is providing? And can I also just say to her this? Can I just say one final thing, Mr. Speaker? Could I ask her to please tone down her inflammatory language? It's putting these people at risk, and those who represent them.
Secretary.
Well, we are making good progress on bearing down on the legacy backlog within our asylum system. We've increased the number of decision makers, we've streamlined the decision-making process, and we're increasing productivity. And we will continue to bear down on that, because that is a big factor in the hotel accommodation.
Kevin Foster.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This issue is always one of the toughest in government, but we're not the only country facing it. We can see, for example, the transformation Greece has made of the situation in the Aegean over the last 6-7 years. Now, whilst the bill will change many of the legal aspects of this, ultimately it's about how we can actually practically make this work. So what reassurance has she got that we'll actually be able to create the relevant amount of detention capacity, have the amount of removal capacity necessary, without impacting on other vital immigration removal work, like the removal of foreign national offenders?
Home Secretary.
May I just put on record my thanks to my honourable friend. He was an excellent minister at the Home Office who shepherded through many of the measures in the Nationality and Borders Act which are now being delivered to combat this challenge, and we build on the achievements of that legislation. We will be rolling out a programme of increasing immigration detention capacity, and that is something on which we're working intensively.
Howell Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Safa, who is a Syrian refugee, escaped from Daesh for her own safety, to save her life. Now, she thinks that the government's plans will make others in her situation feel suicidal. And she told me, with the government's policy, when you arrive, the dream is broken, it is gone. Still, my family have settled in Wales and contribute to society. Now, I want to say to Safa that she is welcome and that we want her to stay as long as is necessary. What does the Home Secretary have to say to Safa?
Well, I'm very proud of our track record of welcoming people through humanitarian routes who are fleeing war, persecution and other conflict, whether it's from Afghanistan, Syria or Hong Kong. That's a record of which I'm very proud.
Manchester.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I very much welcome the government's renewed commitment to dealing with illegal migration. As a Kent Member of Parliament, we're at the front line of illegal immigration, and repeatedly we've been told by government tough measures will be taken, yet numbers have gone up. My constituents want tough, decisive action, and I asked the Secretary of State this. The Secretary of State says we will be having discussions with our French counterparts. Well, in 2010, we signed the Lancaster House Agreement with France on defence and security. How will these new measures address what the challenges were previously to ensure that we have tough, decisive action to deal with illegal migration?
Secretary.
We struck a new deal with France at the end of last year. That saw an increase in the number of French personnel patrolling the French beaches. It saw a new development with British border force officers working and being located in France, working side by side, French police officers, and it's led to greater collaboration and intelligence sharing so that we can clamp down on the people smuggling gangs.
Khalid Mahmood.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My grandfather, his brothers and cousins came to this country in boats, but they came through the British Merchant Navy, and they were proud British mariners who came in, set up in Newcastle and helped the war effort to continue with that. As a descendant of them, this Home Secretary is bringing forward legislation which she knows is not workable. She's not been able to achieve any of this. If you look at the record in terms of the non-return agreements, she doesn't have any. If you look at the policies of what she's going to deal with people that are here, she can't do anything with that. Isn't the truth this? This is purely to deal with the political agenda that she has to try and get the red volt votes, red volt seats but she's trying to do that at the expense of xenophobia and racism, and that is not conducive. That is not conducive to our constituents of the country.
Secretary.
It's irresponsible to suggest that someone who wants to control our borders, someone who wants to say that the numbers are out of control and we need a firm line, a compassionate line, but a firm line on migration, is racist. That is irresponsible, it's wrong, and it shouldn't be put forward.
Francois.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I warmly welcome the principle of the bill, not least as the whole House knows these people traffickers are immoral and utterly heartless. But the elephant in the room, as has already been alluded to, is the ECHR. Unless we can somehow face them down, we will remain tied up in legal knots in our own domestic courts and ultimately in Strasbourg. So can the Home Secretary assure the House that when we see the bill, it will contain specific measures to do that so that the bill will achieve its purpose?
My honourable friend is right to highlight the legal complexity of this issue. There will be measures relating to Rule 39 orders, and I refer him to disapplication of Section 3 of the Human Rights Act, and that sends a message to the judiciary about how Parliament intends for this bill, this Act of Parliament, subsequently to be interpreted in the courts.
Stella Creasy.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My constituent risked his life working for the British forces in Afghanistan. He and his family were invited to the Baron Hotel, but because of an explosion, they couldn't make it, and his family now live in fear in the region. We've been told because he is a British citizen, his children are not eligible for the Arab scheme. Whether it is splitting up families like this, Russian war protesters, Iranian democracy protesters, or the Afghan judges that we have heard about, this government is failing to provide any safe or legal route. Isn't it that that's pushing these people into the boats and into the arms of the smugglers?
The Honourable Lady is wrong. We've welcomed almost 500,000 people to the UK, fleeing persecution, fleeing conflict, fleeing war. Afghanistan, Syria, Hong Kong, Ukraine. She should acknowledge that a great achievement that this country has secured.
Richard Drax.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can I concur with my right honourable friend for East Worthing and Shoreham, who proved that deterrence works? Of course deterrence works.
Hear, hear.
Does my right honourable, and I commend my right honourable friend and the Prime Minister for tackling this difficult issue. Does she agree with me that particularly when it comes to economic migrants, that there's plenty of room for the wealthy West to do more in their countries to prevent them from coming here in the first place?
My honourable friend is right, as usual, and this is where the left just goes wrong. They naively believe that everyone on a boat is always fleeing persecution, war and conflict. The reality is that many of these people are young, fit and healthy men. Many of them have paid over thousands of pounds to come here. Many of them are economic migrants, abusing our asylum laws, abusing our generosity.
Tommy Shepherd.
Mr. Speaker, this is a most foul and shameful policy which depends upon dehumanising and criminalising some of the most vulnerable people on this earth. And it is most certainly going to be in contravention of the European Court of Human Rights. The European Court of Human Rights is overseen by the Council of Europe. And if this government is determined to break the ECHR, I am certain it will lead to a challenge to the credentials of the delegation from this Parliament to the Council of Europe. So will the government now confirm that it is its policy to face suspension or exclusion from the Council of Europe in pursuit of this policy?
Secretary.
The package of measures I've brought forward here represent a humanitarian set of measures which will, above all, deter people from taking a dangerous and sometimes fatal journey in the wild hope that they will lead to a better life in the UK. People must not take the journey. They must not risk their lives. They must not come here illegally.
Jane Stevenson.
Mr. Speaker, I welcome the Home Secretary's strong statement today, which many of my constituents will fully support. It is a perverse system that while the small boats crossings continue, your ability to claim asylum is reliant on your physical fitness or your ability to pay. And I thank her for being absolutely clear that there are many tens of millions more people who would want to and be entitled to claim asylum than we could ever hope to welcome. So rather than the open borders calls from opposite, we have to be pragmatic, we have to be fair. Does she also agree with me that, as my honourable friend said, the Western world has to unite and deal with the poverty and developing nations, and until developing nations are assisted to develop with education and business and trade links, we will see an acceleration of this problem.
Home Secretary.
My honourable friend talks about pragmatism and fairness, and ultimately we are seeing a global migration crisis. Over 100 million people will be displaced throughout the world. Many of them will want to come to the United Kingdom. The simple truth is that we will not be able to take in everyone who wants to come here, and we need to therefore develop a system which is fair, compassionate and pragmatic.
Stephen Timms. Right, Ruth Cadbury.
Like my colleague, my right honourable friend from Hayes and Harlington, I have hundreds of asylum seekers living in hotels in my constituency, and I've met many of them. They've come, they've been fleeing war and terror. They want to work, their children are in school. They're living in shocking conditions while murky layers of contractors and subcontractors are skimming off significant profits. Why is there nothing in this bill to address the collapse of the immigration decision-making that leaves these people in this kind of limbo?
Home Secretary. Well, our 10-point plan has many elements to it. We need to introduce legislation to stop the boats coming in the first place. We then need to bear down on our asylum backlog so that the numbers of people accommodated in hotels in limbo is dramatically reduced. That's the fair thing to do. It's the compassionate thing to do.
Peter Bone.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. People coming across in the small boats are smuggled. They spend thousands of pounds to get here. People who are trafficked come here without paying any money or are duped and then forced into exploitation. But many, Madam Deputy Speaker, who are coming across in the small boats claim exemption under the Modern Slavery Act. Has the Home Secretary taken that into account? Because I'm very emphatic on this. It's damaging the genuine victims of human trafficking, this abuse.
Home Secretary.
He's absolutely right. It used to take 100 days for us to consider a claim for modern slavery. It's now taking over 500 days. It's because there has been a massive influx of people claiming to be victims of modern slavery. And what that's doing is it's impeding our ability to help the genuine victims of modern slavery, which can't be good for anyone.
Caroline Lucas.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Does the Home Secretary recognise that it is positively Orwellian, as well as morally repugnant, to seek to ban people from claiming asylum unless they use safe and legal routes, when those routes barely exist, and when they do exist, they don't function? One of the very few legal routes is the ACRS Pathway 3 from Afghanistan, and it is a total shambles. As of January this year, according to the House of Commons Library, not one person, not one, has actually arrived in the UK under that pathway. So instead of this shameful, divisive, dog whistle legislation, will she urgently open and make work safe and legal routes as the only way to stop the small boats?
Home Secretary.
Her faux outrage is commendable, Madam Deputy Speaker, but the reality is just not borne out by the facts. We've accepted nearly 500,000 people through safe and legal routes for humanitarian reasons. That's a track record of which I'm very proud. I wish she would be too.
Simon Clark.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker.
We've heard a great deal, I'm afraid, from the other side of the House today, setting out precisely what they think of my constituents, who believe that we need to control illegal immigration, and that the issue of small boats in the Channel is the top priority that needs to be brought under control, precisely because it will demonstrate that the government is listening to their priorities and making sure that this country is able to control our borders. That being the case, we all hope this legislation will succeed. But will my right honourable friend promise that if it is frustrated by the European Convention on Human Rights, that we will commit to leave it? Because leave it we must, if in the end this legislation is forestalled.
Home Secretary.
Well, as we saw last year, the Strasbourg Court issuing its Rule 39 order pursuant to an opaque process and one which the UK wasn't represented was deeply regrettable. And therefore we are addressing that particular issue in this bill to avoid that scenario playing out again. But in our view, this bill complies with our international obligations and we must take these measures now promptly.
Dame Neil Griffith.
Thank you very much indeed, Madam Deputy Speaker. Well, the Home Secretary has just said that when she stopped the boats, the bill will introduce an annual cap on the number of refugees the UK will resettle via safe and legal routes. Well, this is really putting the cart before the horse. The Home Secretary knows perfectly well that the legal routes are barely there and are failing. So will she now consider immediately piloting more and better safe and legal routes from those countries like Afghanistan, where people's lives are constantly in danger?
Home Secretary.
Forgive me, but that question just displays the Labour Party's naivety and lack of realism. It is not right to say that everyone coming here is coming here for asylum, genuine asylum or humanitarian reasons. That's why we need to take a measured approach, a compassionate approach, a pragmatic approach.
Dr. Caroline Johnson.
My constituents are very concerned about the number of boats coming across the Channel, and they and I will welcome this government's measures to resolve the problem. But the Rwanda scheme remains unacted. It's mired in court action, and some constituents are wondering why the democratic will of Parliament that they have elected is taking so long to bring forward. How will my right honourable friend ensure that the bill that she's announced today does not face the same fate?
Home Secretary.
Well, the Rwanda partnership has been tested rigorously in the High Court. And that's why I welcomed the judgment of senior judges who upheld the partnership as being lawful and as being compliant with human rights laws and the Refugee Convention. It's a big step forward in terms of vindicating the decision and the partnership that we struck with our friends in Rwanda, and we will await the outcome of further litigation.
Dan Jarvis.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Between October and December of last year, 1 in 3 people making the journey had come from Afghanistan. Now, the government say that Afghans should use safe and legal routes to get here, but by their own figures, only 1 Afghan was relocated in the month of December through the ARAP scheme. Government's own figures. Those left behind, of course, include those who sacrificed everything in support of the UK's mission in Afghanistan, many of whom have already been brutally murdered by the Taliban, and many more undoubtedly will be killed. So can the Home Secretary say that she will honour the commitments that have been previously made to those who served alongside us in Afghanistan? And if she will honour those commitments, how is she going to ensure that they receive safe passage?
As I've mentioned quite a few times now, but it bears repetition, we've been proud to welcome 20,000 people from Afghanistan fleeing the troubles. They're fleeing the Taliban. We've also got a family reunification scheme to enable family members to join their family here. That's a record of which we should be proud, and I really encourage the honourable gentleman to support it.
Best in Europe. Andrew Bridgen.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Can the Home Secretary reconfirm that this bill will stop illegal entry being a route to our asylum system? And what effect does my right honourable friend think this will have on the numbers of people willing to pay evil people traffickers to cross that channel?
Home Secretary.
Deterrence is a core aim of these measures. We need to send the message that if you come here illegally on a boat paying a people smuggler, you will not have an entitlement to life in the UK. And that's why I urge everybody here to get behind this bill.
Hannah.
Madam Deputy Speaker, like many who are genuinely interested in supporting people and solving these problems, I have concerns about this approach in both principle and practice. The issues in communities that this government uses as a straw man are in fact as a result of a decade of systematic underfunding and neglect in health and in housing and in education. Instead of scapegoating the vulnerable, encouraging conspiracy and aggression, when will the Home Secretary get a grip on the chaos within her department, whose processing rates have collapsed along with conviction rate of people smugglers? When will she start solving and stop scapegoating?
Far from scapegoating the vulnerable, this is about protecting the vulnerable. This is about empowering our authorities to properly support genuine victims of modern slavery. This is about enabling a swifter resolution of genuine asylum claims. This is about enabling greater, safer and legal routes. This is not scapegoating. This is about protection.
Bill Wiggin.
Thank you. If moving people to Hereford is the solution, then can I just welcome everything my right honourable friend has said? We, British people, have rights as well. So can she put her shoulder to the wheel for my constituents too?
This is about our humanitarian approach, but it's also about fairness. My honourable friend is right. The British people's famous sense of fair play and generosity has been tested beyond limit. And that's why it's necessary now to go further than we've gone before and make sure that we've got a robust scheme in place that actually stops the boats.
Karen Butt.
Mr. Speaker, the Home Secretary must have been shocked to discover that she and her party have been in charge of the Home Office for the last 13 years, during which time the backlog of asylum claims has done nothing but mushroom. The number of children who have been waiting more than a year for their asylum application to be considered has risen 12-fold. Rapid decision-making is part of the effective deterrence that she claims to want. Why was this allowed to happen? When will she get a grip? And why does passing the same piece of legislation yet again make a difference?
I think if we go down the path of comparing backlogs here, the Labour Party will come out wanting. The backlog that we are dealing with now bears no comparison whatsoever to what the Labour Party left us with in 2010.
James Daly.
Very much indeed, Madam Deputy Speaker. Can I warmly welcome this legislation, and can I confirm with the Home Secretary that running through this is the central thing, that the only route to asylum in the UK is a safe and legal route with an annual cap on the number of refugees. And the annual cap is the crucial point. This is democratic accountability. Yeah. Migration must be based upon the capacity and capability of the country to house and to support people. We cannot just have open borders as pontificated by the other side. So could I ask my right honourable friend, when will we be voting on the migration cap? And can I welcome this statement? It is exactly what my voters want, and well done to the Home Secretary.
My honourable friend speaks a lot of sense. The British people did not vote for 40,000 people to arrive here on small boats. They didn't vote for breaking our immigration laws. What they did vote for is representatives to be serving in this place to speak up for them. And that's why I urge every member of this House to get behind this bill and stop the boats.
Ronnie Cowan.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. According to the last statistics quoted by the Home Secretary, last year 17,000 referrals took on average 543 days to consider. Amongst those were with asylum seekers sticking hotel in my constituency. I have engaged them along with my MSP colleagues Shuman on an ongoing basis since they arrived. The Home Office have not. They have not talked to these guys, they have not stopped the process. Would you consider expanding the shortage occupation list to allow them to work, because these young men want to contribute to a society in which they've been welcomed?
Home Secretary.
Well, we have, aside from humanitarian routes into this country, we also have an extensive points-based system that we developed post-Brexit, and thanks to our freedom on migration. We've issued a record number of work and study visas in the last year alone, and people who want to come here for legitimate reasons should go through our points-based system.
Damien Collins.
My constituents on the South Kent coast have seen with their own eyes the rapid increase of small boat crossings in the last few years. My right honourable friend agreed with me, our priority has to be to stop these dangerous journeys. And the most effective way to do that is to demonstrate that they cannot be a shortcut into the asylum system and they will not lead to permanent residency in the UK.
Home Secretary.
Getting into a flimsy dinghy, wearing a thin polystyrene excuse for a life jacket, paying thousands of pounds, breaking our laws, putting their lives at risk is not the way to come to the United Kingdom. That's what this bill is all about.
Barry Gardner.
The Home Secretary will be aware that the bulk of the 500,000 people that she refers to have come here through safe and legal routes are from Ukraine and from Hong Kong. But with respect to Afghanistan, she will also know that in the whole of the last year, since the new safe route was put in place, only 22 individuals from Afghanistan have been accepted through that route. 22. Is it any surprise then to the Home Secretary that last year 8,500 Afghanis made the small boat crossing to the UK, having rendered meaningless any safe and legal route from Afghanistan? Where does the Home Secretary believe she derives the moral authority to criminalise those 8,500 people simply because of their mode of travel?
Order. It's really important, if we're going to get everybody in, that the questions are very short. The answers have been, but it's really important for colleagues to remember that. Home Secretary.
Well, we have, relating to Operation Pitting, received 20,000 people from Afghanistan, fleeing the Taliban, fleeing conflict, fleeing persecution. I'm very proud of Britain's track record. That is one amongst many safe routes within which people have come to the UK.
23,000 in the last...
Nick Fletcher.
Deputy Speaker, the people of Doncaster and Don Valley have welcomed people from all around the world, including recently through the Ukrainian scheme. But they also realise now that we are full. Will the Secretary of State, confirm to this House and to the people of Doncaster, if an illegal immigrant arrives on our shores, would they ever be granted leave to remain?
Home Secretary. It is right. It is. We are at unsustainable levels of people coming here illegally. It is putting unsustainable pressure on our accommodation, on our public services, on our resources. That cannot continue, and that's why we need to adopt a different approach when it comes to the dealing of asylum cases.
Tonia Antoniazzi.
Madam Deputy Speaker, the Prime Minister stood at the dispatch box last week and committed that government will remain a member of the ECHR because leaving it would break the Belfast Good Friday Agreement. Does the Home Secretary agree?
We are very clear that the measures in this bill comply with our international law obligations, and we're very pleased to keep proceeding with it. I encourage the Honourable Lady to back it.
Stephen Metcalfe.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I hope the whole House will welcome and support my right honourable friend's proposals, because my constituents have rightly been frustrated by our inability thus far to tackle illegal migration and control our borders. This is not about demonising genuine refugees or turning our back on those in need, but stopping illegal activity and ensuring that our long tradition of offering safe haven to those truly persecuted is not undermined by those who abuse our hospitality and break our laws.
Home Secretary. My honourable friend is absolutely right. Once we make progress on stopping illegal migration, it will enable us to better support those genuine victims of, for asylum, those genuine victims of modern slavery or human trafficking. That's what this country is about, and I'm very proud of that.
Chris Stevens.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. The Government is now going to be announcing its 6th immigration bill since I arrived in this House in 2015, which tells you everything you need to know about the failures of this Government and immigration policy. But I want to ask about the content of the bill. Will the Home Secretary tell the House that she will not seek to revisit ouster clauses to prevent judicial review and be mindful of the 2019 Supreme Court ruling that the presence of such clauses does not prevent a judicial review challenge based on an error of law?
Home Secretary.
On closer inspection of the bill, I hope he will see what we have put forward, and that is that we will dramatically reduce the avenues and options for legal challenge, which are often used to thwart removal. It's important that we do that within the law to ensure that our operations can actually be delivered effectively.
David Jones.
Madam Deputy Speaker, I congratulate my right honourable friend on the introduction of this legislation. She's made clear that she intends to secure that the only route to asylum in the UK will be a safe and legal route with an annual cap on the number of refugees. That is the correct and humane approach. And does she agree with me that those who advocate another approach are doing no favours either to the migrants or indeed to their own constituents?
Home Secretary.
My right honourable friend is absolutely right. Safe and legal routes, capped, legitimised through a decision by Parliament, is the right way to support people seeking refuge in this country, not by perpetuating an evil trade in people smuggling.
Andy Slaughter.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. Afghan refugee children who were just about to take their GCSEs in schools in my constituency have been forced to move 200 miles from the hotel they spent the last 18 months in to other hotels. No school places have been arranged for them where they are going, and the Home Office initially denied that they'd moved at all. Is that the level of competence that the Home Secretary is happy with? Will she look at those cases and look at her whole policy on immigration, which is just failing?
Yep. Well, when we introduce measures to streamline our asylum process and to hasten decision-making, the Labour Party voted against them. So seriously, he cannot complain now when there are challenges with accommodating people because they are waiting for an asylum decision and they are being housed in hotels.
Holly Mumby-Croft.
You, Madam Deputy Speaker. My constituents in Scunthorpe are rightly proud of this country's historic record of providing sanctuary for those in need. But they are deeply unhappy to see the numbers of small boats crossing and the economic migrants. And they're deeply distressed to see men, women and children losing their lives in the Channel at the hands of people traffickers. Will she do all she can to ensure these plans going forward strike the right balance, ending these illegal and dangerous crossings, but also ensuring we can provide sanctuary to those who arrive here legally?
Secretary.
Yes, these measures make clear that if you are going to embark on a treacherous and illegal journey, being exploited by people smugglers, coming here and make a spurious asylum claim, you will not be able to settle here. You will not have a life in the United Kingdom. There will be safe and legal routes available to you.
Sarah Sultana.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. It's the oldest trick in the book. When poverty is rising and the rich are getting richer, when wages are falling and people are struggling, the powerful say that the problem isn't greedy bosses or government cuts. The problem, they say, is migrants and refugees. That's what's happening when the Home Secretary whips up fear about an invasion on the South Coast and announces this pledge to cut up our commitment to the UN Refugee Convention, demonising people who come here by boat while refusing to create new safe legal routes for refugees. So how many refugees will the Home Secretary lock up before she accepts that we need a compassionate approach, not this callous and cruel policy?
I refuse to take lectures from a Member of Parliament who wrote a letter to the Home Office to ensure that the removal of a foreign national offender convicted of serious and heinous crimes was not deported from this country. That person then went on to murder. A shameful stain on the Labour Party.
Danny Kruger.
Speaker, I'm very reassured by what I've heard from the Home Secretary that the operation of this excellent bill will not be frustrated by the European Convention on Human Rights. However, as we've heard today, members opposite will be encouraging their friends among the activist lawyer community to do everything they can to use Labour's rights framework to obstruct this law. So I hope the Home Secretary will work with us to strengthen the bill and defend it from that. On the question of safe and legal routes, which we absolutely do need, can I encourage her to make more use of the community sponsorship scheme, which has been such good use for the Ukrainians?
Home Secretary.
Well, the community sponsorship scheme is a good scheme which enables the settlement of people who are seeking refuge in this country. But he talks about activist lawyers. I'll tell you who the biggest activist lawyer is. He's leading the Labour Party.
Mari Black.
Thanks very much. This is not being done, Madam Deputy Speaker, in our name. We did not vote to leave the ECHR, we did not vote for Brexit, and we did not vote for refugees fleeing unimaginable horrors to be detained and deported to Rwanda. Does the Home Secretary not have a shred of compassion for what people, children, families are going through, and will she create more safe and legal routes so that people can actually access safety rather than being stuck to rot in war zones?
Well, she talks about what people voted for or didn't vote for. The British people didn't vote for 45,000 people to come here illegally. The British people didn't vote for £6 million to be spent every day on hotel accommodation. The British people did not vote for abuse of our generosity. That's the compassionate thing that we need to do. Pass this bill.
Mark Fletcher.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I warmly welcome the Home Secretary's statement and intent today. But we have had a policy of housing illegal migrants and asylum seekers in hotels up and down this country. It has caused massive community tensions and strains on public services. So can she confirm when this will end and also how much it will be saving the British taxpayer?
Home Secretary.
We are spending £3 billion a year on supporting the asylum backlog. We are spending £6 million a day on hotel accommodation. That is valuable taxpayers' money, which shouldn't be diverted to those purposes. We need to stop the boats, bear down on the backlog, and save the British taxpayer valuable money.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. My office, like many up and down the country, I'm absolutely sure, deals with outstanding asylum cases week in and week out. And despite promises that the situation would improve, we are still waiting an unacceptably long time for updates from the Home Office. So why is there nothing in the bill to address the fact that there are currently 160,000 people awaiting a decision, a 60% increase on the previous year?
Home Secretary.
We are making good progress on bearing down on the asylum backlog. We've increased the number of decision makers, we've improved the levels of productivity, we've streamlined the guidance, and we're making sure that we are processing the claims individually on a case-by-case basis in a swifter way. That's how we're going to remove people from hotel accommodation and bear down on the costs.
Simon Bones.
Madam Deputy Speaker, I strongly support this illegal migration bill, which is a major step forward in stopping the small boats. Could my right honourable friend provide more details on how the bill will radically narrow the number of challenges and appeals that can suspend removal?
Home Secretary.
Well, we have made it clear that there will be a duty upon the Home Secretary to make arrangements for a removal, and that removal will only be suspended in the event that the claimant can establish that they face a serious risk of irreversible harm should they be removed. In all other instances, that person will be removed and they can make their claims from the safe country or the country to which they are removed.
Rachel Maskell.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. York is England's only human rights city, and we have welcomed asylum seekers to our city. It's a privilege to provide safe haven to them. However, this legislation is a real affront to those values we take forward. But can she publish the legal advice around how her legislation is compatible not only with international law but also European Convention on Human Rights?
Secretary.
As a former Attorney General, I know this government abides by the Law Officers Convention, which means that neither the fact or the content of legal advice is disclosed. That would be a decision for the Attorney General. But we are very clear that our bill complies with international obligations, and we therefore urge everybody to support it.
Luke Evans.
Home Secretary, Prime Minister, thank you for listening to me, many people in Hinckley and Bosworth and across the country who want illegal immigration to stop and the boat crossings. Can she bring this legislation forward? Could she tell us practically how long she expects this to take? And more importantly, will we have the resources in things like the border forces to be able to implement this legislation?
Secretary.
Well, we are introducing the bill today. We hope the parliamentary authorities allow us to move swiftly with the progress of the bill. We want to start scrutinising and voting on the measures put forward as quickly as possible because we want to get it on the statute books and operationalised as soon as possible. It's an urgent challenge. We need to move quickly.
Paulette Hamilton.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker. I am the daughter of immigrants. My parents' generation faced injustice through the mistakes made by the Windrush scheme, which is taking years to unravel. Last year set a record high for small boat crossings with 46,000 arrivals. Mr. Deputy Speaker, why on earth should our constituents trust the Conservative government when under them small boat crossings are going up, they're not coming down?
Great.
I'm very glad the Honourable Lady mentioned Windrush because I'm very proud of our achievements to date to right the wrongs that were committed. Over £60 million has been offered or paid out to the claimants. We are resolving many of the outstanding cases, and I've engaged very closely with members of the steering group and Bishop Webley himself, and I'm very encouraged by the progress that we are making to resolve this issue.
Richard Graham.
Mr. Deputy Speaker, will the Home Secretary confirm that this bill will prevent illegal migrants, especially the some 80,000 from EU accession countries, from abusing our modern slavery laws to prevent return home? And on supporting the most vulnerable, will my right honourable friend confirm that she will create more legal migration routes alongside an annual quota and encourage the Department of Work and Pensions to do more to provide the skills to refugees who have the right to work so that they can contribute to our country in the way that they want to?
Well, one of the benefits of the measures in this bill will be an enhanced ability to support genuine asylum seekers and genuine victims of modern slavery and human trafficking. Our ability is severely impeded at the moment because of an overwhelming number in our system, many of which are illegitimate claims and spurious claims. They're clogging up our system and therefore we're unable to properly support those who genuinely need it.
Martin Doherty-Hughes.
Mr Deputy Speaker, when the people of Clydebank, Dumbarton and the Vale of Leven contact me, they wonder why create a new bill of dubious and moral legal standing when the Conservative and Unionist Party could just continue the long-game strategy of driving down public services into the ground, making Britain poorer than all of our northern European neighbours and therefore decreasing the pull factors of migration. And finally, they wonder if the Home Secretary's incredible and, I think, absurd claim that 100 million people are ready to come to the UK, they want to ask the Home Secretary, or say to them, it's going to take a lot more than a bill copy and pasted from the policy exchange paper to make a difference.
Hear, hear.
Well, his so-called absurd claim is actually backed up by the United Nations. But what I would say more importantly is it's frankly naive to suggest that everybody coming here on a boat is a genuine asylum seeker fleeing for humanitarian reasons. The reality is that many of these people are economic migrants who are abusing our asylum system, and that's what this bill aims to stop.
Gareth Bacon.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker. The Right Honourable Lady, the member for Normanton, Pontefract and Castleford, said that we need solutions, not slogans. So could my right honourable friend please tell me of a single proposal the right honourable lady has made that is anything more than an empty slogan? Will my right honourable friend agree with me that Labour don't have a plan, and they don't really want one either because they simply don't take this issue seriously?
Yeah.
My honourable friend's absolutely right. The Leader of the Opposition made a grand show of his 5 great missions to fix the country. Tellingly, he omitted stopping the boats. Either he doesn't care about illegal migration or he doesn't know what to do about it.
Ruth Jones.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker. People in my constituency of Newport West were outraged by the fact that last year there were just 4 prosecutions for people smuggling a month, while 46,000 people crossed the Channel. So why is there nothing in this government's widely trailed plans to tackle these criminal gangs?
Tackling the criminal gangs at the root of this problem is absolutely essential. That's why we've increased our funding to the NCA to ensure that there's better operationalising, better intelligence sharing, better cooperation with European partners. And that's why I'm very pleased that many criminal gangs have been shut down and 500 convictions have been secured.
That's Warman.
The Ukraine and Afghanistan schemes clearly show the enormous compassion of the British people, but the reality is that the abuse of the system, and particularly the use of hotels for people seeking asylum, saps that compassion. Does she agree with me that we have to end the use of hotels, that this bill will be a crucial part of it, and can she say when she hopes to be able to lay out a plan to put a timetable on ending the use of hotels?
Home Secretary.
Well, I know from his representations that in his community there are particular challenges with people in hotels. We are using hotels to accommodate asylum seekers because there are too many people coming here illegally. Once we stop the business model of people coming here illegally, we will be able to stop the use of hotels.
Chris Evans.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker. Not only is there have to be a strong deterrent when these criminal gangs are found people smuggling. As my honourable friend for Newport West has said, there was only 4 prosecutions per month against 46,000 crossings last year. How is she going to target those criminal gangs who do this? And when they are caught, they have to know that they are going to be punished for this evil trade.
Home Secretary.
Well, I actually joined a dawn raid with the National Crime Agency a few months ago whilst they were going to arrest a people smuggler. And so there is a huge programme of work ongoing to ensure that there is proper intelligence sharing, proper resource and adequate funding to take a tough line against the criminal, evil people smuggling gangs.
Anna Firth.
Deputy Speaker, constituents in Southend West will warmly welcome the fact that this government is taking a clear stand against illegal immigration and breaking the business model that the vile people smuggling gangs depend on and stopping the boats. But one of the most common complaints I hear on the doorstep is about expensive hotels housing asylum seekers, whilst homelessness, sometimes including our armed forces veterans, is on the rise. Does my right honourable friend agree with me that this is not just unfair on the British taxpayer, it is deeply unfair on those genuinely in need who are waiting patiently and legally for a roof over their heads?
Secretary.
My honourable friend is absolutely right to speak for the good people of Southend West in the way that she does. The reality is that we have far too many people coming here. They've put pressure on our accommodation, and therefore we are now forced to accommodate them in expensive hotel estate. That cannot continue. It is costly, it is inappropriate, it's frankly unfair on the asylum seeker because it is no fit place to stay for an indefinite period of time.
Stuart Hosey.
Mr Deputy Speaker, imagine being a Tory Home Secretary whose party is supported by barely 1 in 5 people, having the arrogance to stand up in this chamber and talk about a patriotic majority being taken for a ride. Imagine having the absolute audacity to stand up in this chamber and tell this House there are 100 million people around the world and they're all coming here. No, they're not. The only way this minister can prove this is anything other than crass dog whistle politics is to answer the question from my honourable friend on the front bench. If she was serious, why would she be bringing forward legislation that barely lays a glove on the people smugglers?
Hear, hear.
Mr Deputy Speaker, I'll tell you what's audacious. It's for the SNP to naively claim that everybody coming here is a genuine refugee seeker or asylum seeker, and then to fail to take their fair share of accommodation. They have wholly failed to properly accommodate asylum seekers, demonstrating a paltry number compared to the rest of the United Kingdom.
Jonathan Gullis.
Tree scheme.
Gullis, you're on.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker. Always enjoying getting crossing swords to the opposition. Mr. Deputy Speaker, the people of Stoke-on-Trent North Kidsgrove Talk will warmly welcome what the Home Secretary and the Prime Minister have delivered today, although they'd be even warmer if we at the very least said we would be derogating from the ECHR in this particular case. However, Mr. Deputy Speaker, whilst the Labour Party use their confected outrage on the benches opposite here in Westminster, Stoke-on-Trent Labour keep their head buried in the sand, refusing, and councillors and candidates making any comments on immigration policy because they know what the people of Stoke-on-Trent, North Kidsgrove and Talk think. So when they refuse to sign petitions to empty the hotels in Stoke-on-Trent, which I started and brought to this House, will the Home Secretary therefore tell me when the people of Stoke-on-Trent, North Kidsgrove and Talk can expect to see their hotels cleared and emptied as soon as possible?
Well, my honourable friend's absolutely right to point out the failure by the Labour Party to properly address this subject. The Leader of the Opposition doesn't mention it in his 5 big missions because he doesn't care, he doesn't know. They vote against every measure we've put forward to deport foreign national offenders and streamline our asylum system. They'd scrap the Rwanda partnership. They write letters to stop our deportation of serious foreign criminals. That's what today's Labour Party is like. Colleagues, the fight back starts now.
Luke Pollard.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker. Britain is and should remain a beacon for LGBT rights. So can I ask the Home Secretary a particular question about LGBT asylum seekers who are coming to the UK fleeing persecution because of their sexuality and who they love and who they are, who don't come from a country where there is an existing safe route? Will they be deported back to that country where they are being abused, or will they be deported to Rwanda, where the FCO's travel advice says LGBT individuals experience discrimination and abuse, including from local authorities? Can the Home Secretary reassure a gay MP here like myself that we're not turning our back on LGBT asylum seekers who are fleeing appalling abuse simply for being themselves?
In France, seriously. What I would gently say to the honourable gentleman is that the fundamental objective in this legislation is to stop people leaving safe countries to come to the United Kingdom and claim asylum. That is the fundamental principle running through our international obligations, whether it's the Refugee Convention or other conventions. If people are coming here from a safe country, they really shouldn't be claiming asylum in the first place.
Ben Bradley.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker. I was horrified to hear from benches opposite that they feel this is about xenophobia and racism, that it's about scapegoating up there, that it's about dog whistle politics. This is a simple matter of fairness. Fairness for my constituents who work hard and do the right thing, who see other people arrive here illegally and are able to access taxpayer-funded housing and support that they themselves struggle to access. Now, they've been frustrated by delays and by problems in implementing these measures to prevent this from happening. So can my right honourable friend give her absolute assurance that she's willing to do whatever is necessary to get these outcomes that my constituents deserve?
He's right. His constituents very much deserve fairness and pragmatism and compassion when it comes to controlling our borders. And it's not racist to say there's too much illegal migration. It's not racist to say we can't go on spending £6 million on hotel accommodation. It's not bigoted to say that people shouldn't be breaking the law to come here. It's fair, it's pragmatic, and it's compassionate.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker. As somebody who represents an airport seat, I have a number of hotels currently in use in my constituency. But for 19 months, one hotel in particular, since the fall of Kabul, has been used by Afghans. Now, is that a competency issue that we can't process their claims, or is it a confidence issue? Because I think it's a confidence issue because the civil service have lost confidence in this administration to carry out any effective policies whatsoever.
What I would encourage the honourable gentleman to do is to keep perspective of the global and indeed the European dimension to this problem. Other EU nations are grappling with unprecedented levels of illegal migration. Some countries are saying they are going to stop accommodating people and instead let them abscond willingly. Some countries are accommodating migrants in sports halls and inappropriate accommodation. This is a global challenge and we have to take measures to deal with it.
Scott Benton.
This Parliament and this nation must be sovereign when it comes to controlling our borders. It is completely unacceptable that a foreign court can seek to inhibit the wishes of the elected government of the day. And so, whilst I strongly welcome the measures outlined by the Home Secretary, what assurances can she give to the House that these new measures, and indeed our Rwandan policy, can be implemented without interference from foreign judges?
Secretary.
Well, he's right to highlight concerns about the process to which we've been subject when it comes to Strasbourg, and that's why there is a clause in the bill relating to Rule 39, and we will be specifying the details in very close order about what we're going to propose. But in the meantime, I'm very much welcome the vindication by the High Court of our Rwanda partnership in December. We now proceed to the appeal court, and we wait to see what the courts and their justices decide.
Fleur Anderson.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker. Wandsworth is proud to have welcomed refugees for hundreds of years and to be a borough of sanctuary. This bill sounds like a charter for lawyers. This retread of failed policies relies on returns to third countries, and this was in last year's Nationality and Borders Bill, but 99% of people weren't actually returned because the government doesn't have return agreements. Will the Home Secretary give us a list now of those return agreements being negotiated right now and the deadline for reaching those new agreements, because we'll need to know before we vote on this bill?
Secretary.
Well, we have been in negotiations with several countries, and that's why I welcomed the agreement that the Prime Minister struck with Albania at the end of last year. Let me be clear. We welcome the contributions by Albanians who come here lawfully, but it is clear that for those who don't have a legal right to be here, that we need to work together with the Albanian government to properly relocate them back to Albania.
Jack Brereton.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker. People in Stoke-on-Trent are fed up of being ignored and having their generosity taken for granted. I fully support these measures being introduced today, and will my right honourable friend confirm that these actions will be taken swiftly and that we will see deportations of those here illegally as soon as possible?
Secretary.
The matter is now urgent, and we need to move quickly. That's why we've brought the bill forward today. We hope to proceed with a swift timetable in Parliament. I urge all members of Parliament to support this bill, to scrutinise it effectively, but we want to get on, get the powers on the statute book and deliver them in material terms as soon as possible.
Mr Cunningham.
Thank you very much, Mr Deputy Speaker. Every week I see more asylum seekers asking for my help to progress their claims. Some have waited up to a year, most have waited several. They're left languishing at home awaiting an appointment or a decision, and are desperate to get on with their lives, many now blighted with mental and other illnesses. Isn't this latest stunt by the Home Secretary yet another attempt to direct attention away from her failure to deal with the escalating backlog, which has grown constantly for years on end?
The challenges that he's just described faced by asylum seekers is exactly a reason why he should support this bill. We want to reduce the number of people coming here illegally. We want to reduce the number of people waiting for a decision in the asylum backlog. Only by supporting this bill will we be able to support the genuine asylum seekers in this country.
John Stevenson.
Deputy Speaker, I welcome the proposed legislation. But the reality is we need the confidence of the British people in our immigration system. So therefore, to give additional confidence to local residents in places such as Carlisle and other provincial towns and cities, would the Minister agree to an immediate moratorium on the use of hotels?
Great.
When someone is waiting for an asylum decision, there is a duty on the Home Office to accommodate people and provide them with appropriate support. Therefore, we have been forced to use hotel accommodation in many, many towns and cities across the United Kingdom. It is important that appropriate support is provided to asylum seekers to avoid destitution and homelessness.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker. I have a situation in my constituency where businesses are unable to recruit staff, yet living upstairs we have asylum seekers who are unable to work. The Home Secretary has talked about the cost to the UK of housing asylum seekers? When is she going to get realistic about this and allow people waiting for their asylum claims to be decided to access the world of work?
Hear, hear.
Well, there are many people, those who have come on the ARAP scheme or the ACRS scheme are eligible to work. People who have come via our Ukrainian scheme are eligible to work in this country, and many of them do. And I encourage all members to support those members of those communities to find work with their local job centres.
Burstow.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker. Does the Minister agree that despite the noise and the howls opposite, what we're forgetting is that these measures will save lives, either from people drowning in the Channel or suffocating in the back of lorries? Stopping the boat is the compassionate thing to do, and the only thing that Labour's open border policies will do is enrich people smugglers and risk death in the Channel.
Shame. Great.
Fundamentally, these are humanitarian measures that we are bringing forward, precisely with the goal that he sets out. We need to stop people dying on the Channel. We need to stop people being exploited by criminal gangs. We need to stop the criminality. That's why I encourage everybody to get behind the bill.
Richard Ford.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker. As of September last year, the backlog of asylum applications stood at 115,000 and might include some economic migrants. The average waiting time for an initial decision is 20 months. Does she recognise the moral hazard here that economic migrants coming here in small boats have no incentive to guard against the risk of entering those boats because others have been protected by her government against the consequences of being returned when they get here, and that this is damaging the protections for genuine asylum seekers?
The vast majority of people arriving via small boats have chosen to make that journey of their own free will. They have paid money. They are often and largely young, healthy men. There is no good reason in many instances for them to claim asylum, and they shouldn't be abusing our asylum rules to do so.
Tom Randall.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker. On behalf of all the residents of Gedling who have raised the issue of small boats with me, may I warmly welcome the Home Secretary's statement. Will she confirm that the forthcoming legislation will end the morally reprehensible practice where we've had smugglers as a de facto part of the asylum process? And will she agree with me that given the dangerousness of the cross-channel smuggling, that a robust approach is right, fair and humane?
One of the root causes of this problem is the proliferation of sophisticated, well-coordinated and well-resourced criminal gangs operating across transnational boundaries on the continent. That's why we've increased the resources for the National Crime Agency. That's why we've increased cooperation and intelligence sharing with the French. And it's only by working together with European partners that we'll be able to smash the business model of the people smuggler.
Jim Shannon.
Mr Deputy Speaker, for myself, the Secretary of State, and for many, is the need to help and protect the vulnerable. Does the Secretary of State acknowledge that with the better weather will come an undoubted rise in numbers making illegal crossings? And further, does the Secretary of State believe we should engage further with the French authorities to facilitate legal migration in a more structured way? And will this bill enable those who legally seek asylum be processed efficiently, whilst sending the clear message, if you come here illegally, asylum will be automatically denied?
We've instituted some procedural requirements and limitations on legal claims and time limits for bringing those claims in the bill. That's got the aim of reducing the attempts to thwart removal, to thwart detention, and strikes the right balance between fairness and compassion.
Brendan Clark-Smith.
Mr Deputy Speaker, and on behalf of the people of Bassetlaw, can I warmly welcome this bill from the Home Secretary and the Prime Minister, which we have been crying out for. The opposition often speak of safe and legal routes, of course, which we already have, but does my right honourable friend agree with me that what they actually mean is that they support open borders, blanket approvals and amnesties for those who want to cheat our system, cheat our constituents and cheat genuine refugees.
My honourable friend puts it very well. Labour's policy on this issue is indeed open borders. A former Labour Home Secretary did grant an amnesty on asylum seekers, and it's about ensuring that illegal migration continues through the back door. That's not what the British people voted for. That's not what this Parliament's going to vote for.
Peter Grant. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It won't have escaped the Home Secretary's notice that despite what I've no doubt has been the best efforts of her government whips, they haven't found a single Member of Parliament from a Scottish constituency to have a single good word to say about this bill. The fact is that Scotland's MPs, Scotland's governments, Scotland's local authorities and Scotland's people speak as one, that our biggest complaint about the UK asylum system is that her government will not allow us to welcome as many refugees and asylum seekers as we want to. So can I make a suggestion to the Home Secretary? Will she agree, even on a temporary pilot basis, to allow the Scottish Government to take control of our asylum system? And we'll see whether the best way to deal with asylum seekers is to treat them like human beings or to treat them in the way that she wants to treat them.
Hear, hear.
Well, all the SNP can point to is a track record of failure when it comes to discharging their duties for humanitarian asylum seekers. They totally failed to support Ukrainians and had to hand over responsibility to the UK government. They've totally failed to take their fair share of refugees in comparison to other parts of the UK. It's failure, failure, failure from the SNP.
Tom Hunt.
Mr Deputy Speaker, does my right honourable friend think it's fair to deduce from today's debate that the party opposite think it isn't totally fine to turn up here illegally and stay here for as long as they want? And does she also think it's fair to assume they oppose any kind of cap on refugee numbers? But does she also agree with me that it's hardly surprising, bearing in mind that the leader of this party, in a different guise, actually said that there's a racist undercurrent permeates all of our immigration law? That, my right honourable friend, was the leader of the opposition and they're a human rights lawyer. Therefore, does my right honourable friend agree with me that party opposite just be honest about what they are, pro-open borders, anti any control to immigration, and completely out of step with the majority of people in this country, and they will be exposed?
My honourable friend puts it very powerfully. That's what Labour's policy is. Uncontrolled immigration, open borders, an amnesty for asylum seekers, and total disregard for what the British people want.
Patrick Grady.
But how can you know if someone is a genuine asylum seeker or not unless they're allowed to make a claim and that claim is fairly and independently assessed? When was the last time she actually met with another human being who had come here on a small vote? Has she ever listened to their stories, what they've gone through, what their hopes for the future are? Or does she just look them in the eye and tell them they're not welcome here?
Well, the reality is that we need to all work together now to find a pragmatic and compassionate and fair solution to this problem. That's why I've introduced the measures today, and that's why I encourage all members to support them.
Jonathan Edwards.
Mr Deputy Speaker, last week we saw with the revised Northern Ireland Protocol deal what progress can be made when we work collaboratively with our European partners. Rather than the sabre-rattling content of this statement, isn't it the reality that the most effective way to deal with the issue of small boats crossing the channels is to work in full collaboration with our European partners? And isn't it the case that the number of small boat crossings has increased substantially since Brexit?
Hear, hear.
Well, the reality is that we have developed much closer cooperation with our French partners on this very issue. That's why I'm pleased that we struck a good deal with them at the end of last year, and the Prime Minister is heading to Paris. I will be accompanying him later this week to work to talk further with our French partners on how to tackle this issue amongst many others.
I'd like to thank the Home Secretary for her statement today and responding to questions for an hour and 50 minutes. Thank you. We now move on to the next statement, and I call Michelle Donlan.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker. The creation of the Department for Science, Innovation and Technology marks a watershed moment for science, innovation and technology here in the UK. We now have a government department that focuses on one single mission to make the UK a science and technology superpower. Science and technology is absolutely critical to the UK's future prosperity, security and the health and well-being of our citizens and our environment. That is why it is the central pillar of the integrated review. Countries that embrace science and technology will be prosperous and secure, home to innovators and technology companies of the future. Those that don't, won't. My vision for DCIT starts from an extraordinary position. Last year, the UK joined only China and the US in having a technology sector worth over $1 trillion. Now, despite our relative size, Britain outperforms our closest competitors, and we are a main challenger nation to the US and to China in many areas. We have 4 of the world's top 10 universities. Just 8 of our university towns are home to more unicorns than the whole of France and Germany combined. However, when other countries are investing further and faster in science and tech, we must do the same. We have an incredibly unique and powerful platform from which to grow and innovate for the benefit of the British people, which is why I have said that I plan to take a ruthless, outcome-focused approach to this new department. I will ensure that in both the short term and the long term, our work is based on improving people's daily lives in ways that they can feel and see around them. This government's vision for the future is an NHS that uses AI to find, to treat and to reduce illnesses like cancer and heart disease so that we have more time with our loved ones. We should have local transport systems that allow us to travel faster, safer and cleaner than our parents did. The schools of the future should be powered by the kinds of technology that unlock hidden talents in every child, no matter where they live. As the Department for the Future, our focus will be on how can science, technology and innovation ensure the British people live longer, safer, happier and healthier lives. Such an important goal requires immediate action, which is why in my first few weeks as Technology Secretary, I've been focused relentlessly on action and delivery. I see this as a once-in-a-generation opportunity to send a clear signal around the world that Britain plans to lead the way in science, innovation and technology. The key steps that we have taken out follow. Yesterday, we published the UK Science and Technology Framework, which sets out our goals and visions for science and technology in an enduring framework that will see us through to 2030. It has been developed in close collaboration with UK science and technology sector and represents a commitment to scaling our ambitions and delivering the most critical action needed to secure strategic advantages through science and technology. The framework is the strategic anchor that the government policy will deliver against, and which the government will then hold itself accountable to. It sets out 10 things that the government must do to sustain strategic advantage in science and technology. They are, firstly, identifying the technologies that are most critical to the UK's objectives. Secondly, signalling the UK's science and technology strengths and ambitions, both at home and abroad, to attract talent, investment and boost our global influence. Thirdly, boosting private and public investment in research and development for economic growth and better productivity. Fourthly, building on the UK's already amazing talent and skills base. Number 5, financing innovative science and technology companies. 6, using government procurement to stimulate innovation in key sectors and technologies. 7, tackling international opportunities to shape the global science and technology landscape through strategic international engagement, diplomacy and partnerships. 8, ensuring that the science and technology objectives are